Here's the top rudest residents from US cities. I really want to talk about this because I'm from Long Beach, California. What? Rudest residents? That's crazy to me. I've heard Long Beach be described as weird, but rude? I've always just described Long Beach as that one SpongeBob episode when he gets lost in rock bottom. It's just a really weird place, and I think a lot of people that live in LA do not ever come down to Long Beach. That's the 9th place city. Then 8th place is Las Vegas. I love Las Vegas. I mean, are people rude there? I don't know. There's a lot of tourists. Maybe the tourists are rude. Maybe the residents are just annoyed of the tourists. 10th is Charlotte, North Carolina. There's Tampa, Florida. Memphis, Tennessee. Boston, Massachusetts. Okay, I can kind of see that, although I enjoyed my time in Boston. Louisville, Kentucky. Oh, Philly. Yeah, Philly. Oakland, California. But number 1 here is Miami, Florida. I've never been to Miami, Florida, so I have no idea. They almost have a perfect 10.0 ranking on this list. That's insane. What is going on in Miami? And how did they judge rudeness? Like, what scale is this? What is the metric here? I have no idea what 6.9 rudes is. I would not have guessed Miami outscoring Boston on this metric. Speaking of rude places though, at least websites, countries where X or Twitter were blocked. Now, as of recently, Brazil has just blocked X as of 2024. We lost big, beautiful Brazil. I'm a big Twitter or X user. I really like to just scroll. I'm not really a big poster, but you can follow me there. I would say it's like in my top 2 favorite social medias, but it's been blocked in Nigeria. It's also been blocked in Iran and in Turkmenistan. And then the normal crew here, Russia, China, North Korea. An outlier here though kind of is Myanmar. I wonder why there. Now the question is, will there be more countries that will follow in Brazil's footsteps? Oh, it's also apparently blocked in Pakistan and Venezuela as well. Of course, if you have a VPN, that doesn't matter. It's funny how Iran banned Twitter, but Iran's supreme leader has an account. Yeah, same goes for China. Apparently the move to block Elon Musk's X is actually a political one from Brazil. Which countries have high-speed rail? Couldn't be us. Am I right, USA? No, technically we have higher speed rail. It goes 125 to 154 miles an hour. Of course, this can only be found in the Northeast Corridor. I'm so jealous. They get all the cool public transportation up over there. Meanwhile, here in California, we've been building this for like 20 freaking years. Everything else is under 125 miles an hour. We have Mexico planning to build high-speed rail. I believe that's in the Yucatan Peninsula. Wait, actually, I don't know where I read that from. This is planned to connect Mexico City out towards the west. Okay, the Yucatan line is under construction, but it's not going to be high speed. Then we get to some of the places that are known for their high-speed rail. That's Western Europe, as well as Japan, South Korea, and China, of course. I actually didn't know Indonesia has their own high-speed rail, though. Even Saudi Arabia and Turkey have their own high-speed lines. The light blue has higher speed lines. They're not as fast as the ones in, Spain, France, Germany. Still pretty good, not bad. These orange countries should be excited, though, because their lines are currently under construction, so at least the process has begun. Unless, like I said, you live in California, because who knows how long that one's going to take. But hopefully all these countries won't take quite as long. All the Baltics, we've got Hungary here, then Czechia and Portugal with just a planned line. They haven't started construction yet. Also looks like Israel. Then there's Vietnam, Malaysia, and possibly Singapore. Interesting that Singapore is like a tiny city-state. Why would they even need high-speed rail? And then sadly, the gray countries, long-term planned. So it's being planned, but in the long term, so who knows, like 2040? That's Russia, that's Norway, that's poor Canada. I feel like Canada could really benefit from that. Most of their population lives right around here. Then Brazil, then South Africa, then Australia. Keep in mind, the benefits of high-speed rail isn't just high-speed rail itself. It's also the fact that plane tickets become infinitely cheaper because then the airline industry has to compete with the rail. That's my favorite part. About to take a $30 flight to New York. Australia is not getting any form of high-speed rail this century. And that's so sad because look how efficient that could be. All their population lives over here anyways. It's not like they'd have to build a line that spans the entire continent, just barely a quarter or less. Percentage of homes with air conditioning. And surprisingly, the US is not number 1. The US holds the highest installed capacity of air conditioning, approximately 40% of the global installed cooling capacity. That's crazy. But Japan is number 1 on this list. Japan has the highest AC sales per capita in the world. Then their neighbor, South Korea, not too far behind with 86% over here, which is pretty interesting from those two places because, I mean, do they generally get that hot? I'm sure they get hot, of course, but are they getting as hot as like Las Vegas, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona? And it's insane because all those states border Mexico and Mexico only has 16%. It gets hot in Mexico. Mexico has the highest portion of cooling-related CO2 emissions compared to any other country. Mexico is actually exactly with Brazil at 16%. South Africa is only at 6%. And then famously, where all the jokes come from, Europe only at 10%. To be fair, Europe doesn't really need, I feel, like air conditioning, although they haven't been experiencing obviously hotter and hotter summers, so maybe they are starting to need air conditioning now. Can't really blame them for not having it though. Like Saudi Arabia's gonna have a lot. I mean, it's a giant desert, 63%. AC constitutes 70% of electricity demand. I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. 60% in China. By 2050, Indonesia, India, and China are expected to drive half of the global growth in cooling energy demand. That shouldn't be surprising considering those are are like, you know, the top nations in terms of population, and Indonesia is very close behind. I think they're like, what, 6? A German visiting Hong Kong asked me, what's that metallic cage that every household has? How the hell does anyone survive in Saudi Arabia with no AC? I can't even imagine. Most countries have been colonized by Europe, and it's actually not even close. Obviously, every single place in the Americas was colonized by Europe. French Guyana, for some reason, is not labeled, but that is because it is literally French territory. It's been colonized by Europe. What? Obviously, it's, yeah, whatever. Obviously, Europe itself is excluded from this list, which is funny because they're excluding so many countries in this continent, but a lot of these countries weren't the colonizers. Most of them were done by like the same 5 offenders. Pretty much every place in Africa were colonized at one point, except for Liberia. That is ours. That is our very unknown US colony that we colonized. Really weird backstory there with Liberia. Funny enough, you can really consider Siberia to be colonized by the Europeans too. It was just the Russians. That's why Central Asia is included. You might be confused because they don't have a coastline. Yeah, that was the Russians that did that. You see, Oceania was the British. The Dutch were in Indonesia. The British were in Malaysia. Spain initially had the Philippines, and America took that. Ethiopia comes close to making this list, but remember the Italians during World War II. This is colonized or controlled by Europe at one point. Now, the light blue is partially controlled or influenced by Europe. I mean, every place has been influenced by Europe at one point or another, but not all of Saudi Arabia. Like, a lot of Saudi Arabia was controlled by Europe. The same can't be said for China, though. They had, like, definitely different spots, but I would say the vast majority of China was still Chinese-owned. Afghanistan got invaded by the Soviet Union back in the 80s. Here are the big ones, though. It's Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and Thailand. The fact that Thailand did this is so incredibly impressive. Korea just kind of got lucky because before that, they were owned by China, and then after that, they were owned by Japan. Japan, I think, it's just an island. I could literally like, break down every single country. This is a complicated topic. This map doesn't truly do the history justice. Yeah, there it is. In compensation, Korea was colonized and exploited by China and Japan. This is a very important point. Yeah, I mean, some of those European countries were colonized by other European countries. It's not fair to just blame the entire continent of Europe for all this. Eastern Europe moment or Balkan moment. Map of all the sightings of a colossal squid. A lot of times they aren't quite as large as the viral version we might believe. I mean, this one just straight up looks like almost a kraken. They're not krakens, but I have heard theories that the ones that we've sighted, those are the babies. I don't know how real that is. The crazy thing is, we just finally confirmed the existence of a colossal squid like recently. I remember a time when we didn't know for sure if they did exist. Sorry, that's crazy for me to say. I remembered. 1925 is when we finally captured it. This is what I remember. In 2003, we finally found a second specimen which confirmed their existence. Like maybe the first two were just like freak of natures. We didn't exactly know what the hell they were. And in 2007, we found a colossal squid that was over 1,000 pounds. So as you can see, we're really only finding them in the southern hemisphere here. I mean, if the first map didn't make that obvious enough. So they really like Antarctica, which I guess makes sense. There's probably big enough things there for them to eat. I mean, what do they even eat though? I hope not humans. They eat small and large fishes, including this toothfish and other squids. Wow, cannibals. Now, I think we finally confirmed that they do not get kraken size, but man, they do still get pretty big, clearly. I guess this is what triggers people that get afraid of the ocean. Like, we still don't know what is out there. Where do automakers sell their cars? It's gonna be very funny because I don't know how often American companies sell American automobiles outside of America. But let's see, Chevy and Ford with 66% and 57% all being sold here in North America. You know what? I'll be honest, I thought that percentage would be a lot larger. That's not as bad as I thought. Okay, question though. This says Latin America and you have Central America and parts of North America included. This is a massive mistake here on this map. Okay, so Latin America would include Mexico. This explains everything. I do know American car companies do sell a lot of their American cars to Mexico. I bet this is supposed to be combined. Like Chevy's 66 should be plus 22 because a lot of it's going to Mexico, but there's probably other countries in there, of course, too. Does a country like Puerto Rico count? That's a U.S. territory. I can see it here on this map, though. Interestingly, Ford is doing a much better job selling in Europe than, I mean, Chevy's not even in Europe. 26%, almost a quarter of Ford's entire sales are going to Europe. What are they selling there? It's apparently the Ford Puma or the crossover. This looks like the most European Ford I've ever seen in my life. Do we even can I buy that here? Oh, and I wonder if this is really only being sold in the UK, too. That would make sense. Dang, they love these little Puma things. I've never seen this in my life. Oh, it's like a Ford Fiesta. Everything else here for Chevy and Ford is exactly kind of what I expected. Now compare that to the diverse areas that Japan, South Korea, and Germany are selling their cars. To be fair, Germany's not as diverse, I think, as Japan and South Korea. VW, Mercedes, and BMW are mostly selling in Europe here, and then actually a lot to China. VW is selling more to China than all of Europe, and same for BMW. We Americans also like our German cars. Only 8% are VWs. This is percentage of sales as of 2023, though. German brands are not selling as well in other parts of Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America, of course. And this is why Japan and South Korea dominate. Although Honda really only selling a third to North America, a third to China, and a third to the rest of Asia. Toyota's going all over the place. In fact, I would advise people to look up a war called the Toyota Wars here in Africa. Them Toyota trucks can be used for everything. We here in North America really like our South Korean cars, clearly. I can't believe I've never seen a diagram like this before. This is interesting. Yeah, where are the Italian cars at, though? I do wish there were more brands available, but cool. Top countries that are losing people to immigration. Immigration.
Emigration.
Migration. My bad. Or the act of leaving one's own country to settle permanently in another. So these are the places that are losing people because they're deciding to live abroad. Well, in the case of Ukraine, that's a weird way to put it because I don't think they're just deciding to live abroad. They don't have a whole lot of other options. Crazy how Ukraine is literally a war-torn country, and then there's Greece, which, you know, they're not quite at the Ukrainian levels, but losing over 150,000 people in 1 year, that's crazy. There's even more people leaving Turkey, though, which considering Turkey's population, they have over 80 million people. I guess, you know, they're gonna obviously have higher numbers. We should really be looking at this from like a per capita basis, but all right. Like a nation like India seems like they're losing a bunch of population, but there's like almost 1.5 billion people living here. Them losing 1 million is literally nothing. Pretty much every place, though, in South Asia is leaving. Nepal losing almost 500,000, Bangladesh losing over 500,000. China is not considered South Asia, but still losing about 1 million. Again, that's another place with almost 1.5 billion people living in it. These numbers are actually considerably pretty good, at least compared to India's. But nobody matches Pakistan on this list, 1.6 million. Pakistan only has over 200 million people living here in the first place, so if this continues to happen, they're gonna run out of people really fast. Well, in less than 200 years. Philippines also pretty high. There's a couple places in Africa, but the second place nation is Sudan, 1.4 million. I'm curious where these people are going exactly, but that map would be a lot more complicated. A lot of people in the Philippines come to the US, and I know for a fact a lot of people from Mexico come to the US. Now, 100,000 really isn't that many. More people live in Venezuela, and of course Brazil at 240,000. I know a lot of Brazilians usually move to Portugal, and then if they live there for 2 to 3 years, they can become an EU citizen and move anywhere. There's so much to analyze when it comes to maps like these. Big thanks to patrons. Month 1 in Drew's basement. Kansas was mentioned. I can't sleep without Drew's voice. Drew's Argentinian Grandpa. I'm back, Amateur
boys.
Archaeology.
aPhatNarwhal.
Carmel S.
Pavlik.
DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood. InquisitorXarius. KirinoIsBestGirl. Tambre,
Tyrol.
The Mexican
KingBearHaze.
Fredrik
and
Tibblin. ZaneyBoi.